All right, if you're like me, you're wondering what's the best place to have my money make some money. A lot of things going on now in the economy, and I'm not really sure what they mean. So fortunately, we have a perfect person today as a guest who can explain a little bit more about that to us. So if you want to know a little bit more about what to do with your money, stay tuned. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Scan FYI. My guest today is Mike Powers. He is from Garden Savings Federal Credit Union. He's the president and the CEO. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Andrea. How are you?
I'm doing well today. So, a lot of things going on in the world of money, and everyone is wondering, I'm sure like me, what do we do with our money and what does it all mean? So for those, before we even get into that though, for those who may not have met you previously, would you just share a little info, introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you?
Sure. My name is Mike Powers, and I'm president and CEO of Garden Savings Federal Credit Union. I am 32 years in the credit union industry. I've worked at two credit unions since I got out of college in 1993. So I've been in the industry a long time. Garden Savings is actually been in business since 1968. We are the fifth largest credit union in the state of New Jersey with over a $500 million in assets. And we have six local branches for people to do their banking and financial transactions, with our newest one being down in Brick. So we are now much more local to the residents of and participants in SCAN.
Welcome to Ocean County.
Thank you. We're happy to be here.
And you know what? We'll put all of all the info about how to reach out to Garden Savings in the show notes, so you don't have to worry about memorizing anything. And again, a new spot for Ocean County residents like me, so that's great news.
Great. Yeah, we're happy to be there.
So, what's going on?
Yeah, a lot. Uh,
The
pick up.
brief edition, what's going
Yeah,
on?
yeah. I mean, if you pick up the newspaper or go online and read your newspaper, I mean, there's always so much talk about what's going on with the Fed and what's going on in the world with tariffs and how much they're going to impact the economy and things of that nature. And so financial institutions like us, we're watching everything very closely to see how things break, right? So we are looking the next time the Fed meets. Right now, rates have been parked at the same rate for quite a while now. There were anticipations, or there was some anticipation that rates would be dropping significantly in the early part of the year, and that did not happen. So right now, the next time the Fed meets is at the end of July. Most people, I think I saw about a 75–80% chance, think the rates will again remain parked where they're at. September, October, November may be a different story. We might start seeing quarter point cuts in the rates by the time the fall rolls around. What does that mean for consumers? It means that you may not see deposit rates parked as high as they've been. They've already been coming down a little bit, but further cuts could see further cuts on deposit rates. Probably not dramatic because they're only talking about quarter point cuts at the Fed level, but you could see some of that. On the bright side, cuts could inspire the mortgage market for people that are looking for to buy homes or home equity loans, et cetera. Even car loans, you may see rates start to come down on the loan end, although they usually lag the deposit cuts just by a little bit. But you should start seeing some rate movement in the fall if things hold. Now, what
Right.
we found, I mentioned to you before we started, one of the things we found is that rates are going haywire, right? Because they go like this, and the forecasts of rates have gone like this year. We originally had built in that there might be four cuts this year, but then before our budget, thank goodness, before our budget numbers went to our board of directors, we saw that the rates were going to not move in the first half of the year. So things have kind of held the form of late, but the forecasts and predictions on the rate movement have been so volatile, partly because of the global economy, partly because of the tariffs. No one still
Mhm.
knows if that's going to have a long-term impact. So everything's been really cautious. And then, of course, if it's not a big secret, the president of the country does not love the Fed chairman. So that makes things difficult too, because they go back and forth and spar on a lot of things. The president would have liked to have seen the rates cut 3 or 4 times already, and they haven't moved at all this year. So, yeah, it's a really interesting time to watch what's going on.
For people who don't really understand the relationship between the rate of the Fed and what happens in banks and financial institutions, can you just explain that, how one goes down?
Yeah,
What is the relationship? Because I think that is key for a lot of people not knowing.
yeah, the correlation is not direct to the second. It's not like real time direct, but there is a correlation that is, if not if not direct, close to it, right? Because what you'll see is as the Fed cuts rates and banks are making less money on what they can invest because of the Fed rates where we invest, we wind up having to cut our deposit rates somewhat because we're not getting the same returns on what we're investing. And so we have to lower the rates that are paid out. Otherwise, we wind up underwater to our operating costs. Conversely, on the lending end, as rates come down, that inspires more lending, which is good for financial institutions because instead of investing the money, you can loan it out to more people. So as rates come down federally, they typically come down at financial institutions on the deposit side and the loan side. Is there a lag between those sometimes? Yes, a little bit. But generally speaking, and it's not necessarily a one-to-one correlation, but you will see as rates come down federally, rates go down on the deposit end and the loan end. And if the inverse was true, you would see just the opposite, which we've seen over the last couple of years when rates were rising. You know, the mortgage
Yes.
market dried up, loan rates went up, car loan rates. People with 800 credit scores now are walking into car dealers and are lucky to get 5.5, 6%. A few years back, you were seeing 1.99 5-year loan rates. So, yeah, as rates go up federally, they tend to go up at the financial institutions and the car dealers for that matter.
So when rates go down, and by the way, I hate using the word volatile where money is concerned because everyone is
Yeah,
watching their money. You
sure.
you like to think there's stability, but maybe there isn't.
Yeah.
But as rates come down on the Fed level, it's the saver who is getting less.
Yeah, the savers typically would get less, which is why sometimes we don't love to see this, but sometimes we see people will then either take out money from the financial institutions and put it in the stock market if they have an appetite for risk. That does come with more risk.
Right.
Or they start to strategize how they're going to invest their money, whether it's going 1 year on a CD. I mentioned to you again off air that we're seeing a gradual shift now where I think our best rates out there are around 4%. Maybe we might have one rate a little higher on a CD, but 4%. But we have a 5-year CD that's 3.25%. And we're starting to see more and more people go into that 5 year because they're worried like, all right, great, I can get a short-term CD that's 4% for 1 year. But then what if rates are 2.5 or 2.25 in a couple of years? Then the next 4 years I'm at 2.25. Whereas now they could probably tie up the money at 3.25 and know they have a decent return. 3.25 is not, 6%, but it sure beats two. So.
Yeah, and as you get older and you're looking for stability because you're on a fixed income, yeah, I guess anything is better than 1 or 2%. And
Right.
it's interesting, just mentally, and I'm thinking, well, the rates get lower, it's a lot easier to spend your money. And
Yep.
there's so much debt, among consumers now in this country. It doesn't feel like the greatest thing for a lot of people to go into debt, but that's,
Yeah, some people are great at managing debt and they know how to play things to the penny. Other people think they can manage debt properly and wind up getting themselves in some trouble, which is why nationally you're seeing delinquency rates on loans higher than they were. You're seeing what we call in the industry migration of credit score. Everybody likes to see migrations of credit scores go up, right? People that were 680, 690 get into the 700s, and people in the 700s get into the 800s. Right now, you're seeing a downward migration trend, which is because you've had people with great credit that were doing really well that are now taking on more debt that they can. Their credit scores going down, so that inverse relationship on credit migration is not a great thing. So you just always have to be extremely careful when managing your debt. I grew up in a household where I was always told the less debt you have, the better. There are reasons to keep debt out there for tax advantages with mortgages and things like
Mhm.
that. But for the most part, yeah, I mean, I think we'd all ideally love to manage our debt where it's just like paying your electric bill and it's not a big thing and it's just a managed expense every month. Is that always going to be the case? No. So you do have to be careful. You need to pay attention to your money and look for opportunities to invest it wisely and to not take on unnecessary debt would be the word I would use.
You know what, Mike? Can we just take a moment to mention something? Because we just talked about credit scores. And even if you're, an older adult and you're saying, well, I'm not buying a car, I'm not getting a mortgage, I still feel like it's always good to know what your credit score is.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely.
And these days, what is a good credit score? What is an acceptable credit score?
That's all in the eye of the beholder. You can get debt. You can borrow money at a decent rate if you've got anything, say 640 and above. But really, where you start seeing the cut is 740 and above. 740 and above is excellent credit. Over 800 is outstanding credit. So, if you can keep that rate there, it's good. And one of the things I used to do, there used to be a group in Newark of young entrepreneurs, maybe 10, 11 years ago, that I used to go in and teach a class to once a semester about credit scores and showing, like, if you don't think your credit score is important, here's what the average person who's got a 640 credit score pays in interest over the course of their life versus the person who's managing a 770. And would I be eye opening to the kids, because you're seeing figures of, if the average person owns 4 or 5 cars, takes out a personal, you're talking 40, 50, 60, $70,000, maybe more, depending on what you do in savings over the course of your life. To manage your credit score saves you so much money in interest over the course of your life. So I think it's important to maintain a good credit score no matter how old you are, because you just never know. And everybody gets a new car here and there. Sometimes you're
Yeah.
lucky enough to be able to buy it in cash, but no matter what your age, I know, my dad just bought a new car and he wound up paying for it in cash, but he was torn and he was going to get the loan. And he wound up going for it just in cash. But you want to be able to have that. You want to be able to make a good decision because you've got a good credit score. And if somebody throws out a really low rate to you, maybe it's worth it. Maybe you want to have more of your funds available to you and just pay it off over time. It's everyone's personal decision.
And I think how wonderful it is for someone to say, I have the cash. I don't have to worry about it.
Right. Yeah.
That was a lifetime in my mind, a lifetime of discipline and savings, being careful.
Yeah.
And so if somebody right now needs to know what is my credit score, where do they find that?
There's lots of free credit score apps out there right now, that you can go to and websites you can go to. Your financial institution can also usually do something that's called a soft pull on your credit, which is, even if you're not applying for a loan, just kind of see what your credit score is. It does not cost anything. It doesn't cost you points on your credit score. Typically, if you walk into a car dealer and they say, let me run your credit score,
I'm going to check it right away.
they're doing more of a hard pull, and that can cost 3 points off your score. Typically, when someone pulls your credit for an application of credit, it cuts your score by 3 points because you've applied for something. But if you're just doing a soft pull and you check on one of these free websites out there, freecreditreport.com is the biggest one. Just go out there, check your credit score. Then you don't have to have the dealer do it. You can say, I already know my credit score. You don't need to pull that. So, yeah, and this is what you're going to see when you pull it.
All right, that's good to know. Now, we had talked about, you had explained to me this idea of something called laddering,
Yes.
which I am not at all familiar with that. So we're all going to learn something together today. So would you kindly explain that? And this again has to do with taking care of your money.
Yeah, sure. Laddering strategies are prudent in pretty much any economy, whether that's a rising rate or a lowering rate. And it's particularly prudent for people that think they may need the money at some point, but they don't necessarily need it all tomorrow. And so we talked a little bit before about how we're seeing a shift of people putting their money into some 5-year certificate CDs as opposed to 12, 14-month, 8-month CDs because that rate might be higher, but it's shorter term. So a laddering strategy would be something where you're protecting yourself in all the environments, especially if you have some years you're confident in playing with. So, for instance, let's say I had $100,000 to invest. I may ladder this strategy so that I put 20,000 in an 8-month CD,
Oh,
20,000 in a 12, 20,000 in a 2-year, 20,000 in a 4-year, 20,000 in a 5-year. So what that does is it gives you some rate protection. It lets you know that, these are the rates you've got and you've locked them in. And then if the economy, in this case, rates are most likely going to be down, you're getting a percentage of your money at that 4%, which is great, but you're also protecting your long-term future. And so that's where the term laddering comes in. You take
okay.
your CDs and you go each rung of the ladder, so that you're breaking up your money and protecting yourself in a mobile rate environment where it could go up or down. What I'm talking about today definitely favors a downward rate shift because you're kicking some yield in the short term to get a longer term good yield. And
Because
and you start looking instead of saying my $100,000 is earning 4% if you put it all in short term and not knowing what's going to happen after that first year, you're now taking all your 100,000, breaking it up into 4 or 5 different rungs of the ladder, whichever one you want to do, and you can actually calculate your blended yield. So, you could say 4%, 4%, and then 3.5, 3.25, 3.25. And you take that, especially if it's evenly split, and you divide it by 5, and there's your blended yield. So you may have, a situation where your blended yield is 3.6, and that might be more than ample for you.
no one has a crystal ball, sadly, or
No,
if you do, it's not working that well.
no,
So,
no, no. Crystal balls are definitely hard to come by, and I'll be the first to admit it. They're hard to come by for executive of financial institutions too. It changes a lot, especially back in November when the presidency switched to. There was a lot of, I know you said you don't like the word, but it's true, a lot of volatility because no one knows what to expect when any new president takes over. So there's a lot going on, and the tariffs definitely threw things for a loop. Right now, I'm pleasantly surprised that there has been almost no impact to what we're seeing, if at all. However, everybody kind of the word in the industry is that don't fall asleep on that because there still could be an impact down the road as these things really start taking place. Right now, most of the larger tariffs the president has negotiated down to where they're almost nothing by the time they go live. And so that's
mhm.
why there's been no impact. But the first country that really pushes back and says, we're not giving into your demands, and this is the tariff. Those are going to be a little different. Those may have a bigger impact if somebody does that. Right now, like I said, I've been pleasantly surprised with the fact that there's been so little impact of them to our industry.
Well, we're all kind of waiting and watching
Yep.
because there's a lot of unknown. And if somebody wanted to get a little bit of advice, they have some money to invest, or they want to know what's the best thing, are there folks at Garden Savings that, and again, the phone number and everything all is in the show notes.
Yep.
But if somebody calls,
Yep.
the bank, that there's someone
Yep.
to talk to for help?
Yeah, absolutely. Any of our
Okay,
branch managers or assistant branch managers should be able to uh,
good.
help you out with that. We have member service representatives at every branch. At a bank, they'd be called customer service representatives, but our people that bank with us are members of the credit union. So yeah, we have people at every branch that can help. I know in our Parsippany branch, our branch manager Stephanie is excellent. Our Sayreville branch, Elia, Christie in the Brick branch, they're really, they know their stuff and can definitely walk people through the different options out there. Some people like to keep their money liquid in a money market, and we have those too, where you're getting, lesser yield, but your money's always accessible to you. And for me personally, I would not in a falling rate environment have as much liquid. I'd probably put it in CDs to get that yield while I can right now. But in a rising rate environment, we had a lot of money in the money market because people were wondering, is this the highest rates are going to go, or are they going to go even higher? And so they park them in the money market for a little while, and then they see a rate they like, and then they just open it there, which is a smart way to do it in a rising rate environment. Falling rate environment's a little trickier for everybody. Yep.
There's that crystal ball thing again.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And let's face it, some of it is an educated guess, and some of it is an outright guess because even the experts get it wrong.
But I guess this is the thing for every person and their money, it's a very personal decision because you might have some health issues and you're going to be spending money or, everyone is different. So anyone listening, it's not a one size fits all, which is why you should always speak to someone before
Yeah.
making a big decision.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if you're not money savvy, like you don't pay attention to it. There are people that, read articles endlessly every day and check their finances every day and look at how their balance is doing every day. And there are people that kind of park their money. And
Right.
there's no right or wrong way to do it. But if you're a person that doesn't pay that much attention to it, I always recommend speaking to an expert or someone who can help you out with a decision. It's always better to double check, right? I mean, we do that here on day-to-day business decisions, even. We just will say, have somebody else put a second set of eyes on it. It never hurts. Get a second opinion. It never hurts.
So there's always ways to make your money grow, even in this environment, no matter what. And I think the best thing to do if you're not sure is to call, Garden Savings Federal Credit Union, see what they have to say. They might give you some great advice.
We'd
I'm
love to
sure
help.
they will.
We would love to help. Yep.
All right, Mike, always a pleasure to speak to you. I always learn something.
Yep. Great catching up, and wish everybody a great rest of their summer. And yeah, we appreciate the opportunity to participate with SCAN. And, recently,
Thank
as
you.
you know, I'm actually on the board of trustees now for SCAN. So that is, I've enjoyed that very much, getting to know the group a lot better and participate in a lot of things. So yeah, we're happy to help out, and it's a great group, and happy to be here.
Thank you. All right, remember out there, if it's important to you, it's important to us. I'm Andrea Tarr, and we'll see you next time on Scan FYI. Bye, everyone, and bye, Mike.
Bye, Andrea.